Hey, everybody, we're back. Technical difficulties. I'm sure everyone is having weather. That's probably the problem.
We broke the internet. Sorry,
Broke.
guys.
So many of you are following us that we just broke the internet. We did notice, though, pretty quickly that we were not there anymore. But we were starting kind of our segue into the prison system and population and how that is an expression of sort of how white privilege in America works. And for more on that, Joe.
Hey, hey. Thanks, Mego. Appreciate it. Being out of weather. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. Actually, with the way it goes in the prison system here, um, for numbers, because Megan likes numbers, black black male versus white male, blacks are 5-to-1 incarceration rates per 100,000 individuals.
Does that mean
So,
like overall, or is that like for marijuana, or is it for like
no,
small everything?
just across the board,
Okay.
everything. There's no specific crime that's
Just in,
non-violent drug offenses to rapes, murderers, and what have you. Everything all lumped in. I didn't segregate it by crime because it seems to be the punitive portion across the board, no matter what the crime is still 5-to-1.
wow.
You know, so incarceration for murder, if it's they're all proven guilty, but like the 5-to-1 would be like sentencing. Black person would get, you know, almost 5 times the sentence for a regular. I don't want to say a regular murder, but let's say it's drunken driving and involuntary manslaughter. Oh yeah, it's just regular murder. That's all. No, let's say it's a drunken driving fatality, single car crash. Only one person is murdered. It's the victim, and the drunk driver is black versus drunk driver that's white. White person may get manslaughter. The black person may get vehicular manslaughter, with negligence, and they'll add charges, and they'll probably get a 15-year sentence versus maybe a 5 to 8 year sentence or something like that. Or maybe it'll be 15 years of mandatory you serve it day for day, whereas a white individual may get a 5-year sentence and then be paroled or what have you. So in that capacity, that 100,000, I guess I should say, if convicted, the sentencing is longer for a black individual versus and Hispanic individual versus white individual, but the incarceration rates, these are per 100,000 males of just being convicted of said crime, and that's 5-to-1 black to white, 3-to-1 Hispanic to white. And for women, the sentences are generally less, but minorities are still sentenced longer as opposed to their white counterparts. Um, a lot of this comes up for like community, goes back to the white privilege. You have access to resources, access to things that minorities don't normally have access to, whether it be a good lawyer. If it's assumed that you come from a crime-ridden community, you're probably going to get penalized a little bit more because you don't get the benefit of the doubt, which is another factor of white privilege.
Right.
White people tend to get the benefit of the doubt, minorities do not. Criminal history, obviously, that's without saying. If you've got recent criminal activity, you're going to be penalized more. Here's one that I didn't know, though. Fun fact: some of your offenses can have the FBI brought in to those sentences as well. And if the FBI investigates and charges you, now it's a federal crime, and that can be used to in not only it. How am I trying to say this? The charge becomes more specific. They can add more charges to it, and a federal charge comes with an automatically longer sentence. So, say it's for instance for drug trafficking or what have you, but it could be from a state level okay, we caught you with intent to distribute. Let's just say marijuana. You've got 2 pounds separated, broken down into ounces that you were going to sell.
Right.
If it's a state charge, you might get, couple years parole or what have you, or you get a couple years prison and then parole. Fed charge, you're probably going to get 5 to 10, and you're going to do Fed time, not state time, which some people say is better. I wouldn't know. I've never been to prison. Only county jail. Woohoo! But yeah, they could use that as a tactic. So a lot of times that the Fed charges can be used against minorities to extend their sentences or to come up with additional charges where state probably would not come with all that.
And that could be something as easy as like, well, we think you know somebody, so we're going to charge you with more, right?
I mean, yeah, I guess it could be. It's really up to the prosecutor and the police department in itself.
Oh, whether or not
the investigators. The investigators can choose to bring in the feds for, I think you can't do it for any charge, but certainly, drug charges, that is an option. If it comes to, as you were talking about the family environment, say that there was a accusation of molestation or something like that, I think the feds could be brought in on something like that. And it's crazy. And then the last thing I'll get into on the penance portion, and I've got, as Megan and everybody here, Micah and Elizabeth will attest, there's a lot of information, a lot more subject matter, not only between family dynamic, incarceration, education, and healthcare. There's so much underlying upon that. Google it, Bing it, whatever search engine you use, just put, disparity in amongst racial divide, and a plethora of articles will come up. But as far as my topic for prison, the last thing is in 2005, it was decided that non-government supported methods to determine the sentencing phase could be used. So before that, judges had to stick to a regimented guideline, if you will, about punishments for different crimes or what have you. And you pretty much stuck to that. In 2005, they said you don't have to do that anymore. So a judge's personal bias, let's say he got bullied by a black kid in high school, and now all these black criminals come in. He's like, well, because of that black kid who bullied me, I know that they're all aggressive. So if it's a fight or an assault or whatever, I'm going to give you the maximum sentence now instead of the recommended sentence because I have this personal history and bias with that one individual who I'm going to use to represent every black person that comes in my courtroom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy. And it just means if they were raised in a way that they not necessarily racist, but have stereotypical biases against minorities or preconceived notions that this is just inherently who they are. Yeah. Aggressive, robbers, thieves, things of that nature. They can use that to sentence them to longer sentence, and people of their peers, white people or what have you, will get less sentence because they again get the benefit of the doubt and the plausible norm of you can overcome your mistake, whereas these people, it's going to be harder for them because it's innate within their nature, so I'm going to punish them longer. Anyway.
That sort of just to tag onto that, because I think that happens a lot too when people hear those numbers. I think some people hear, like, that's ridiculous. Like, why so many more people, black people or people of color, than white people? Some people hear that, and maybe you don't realize you're thinking it, but you have this subconscious, like, well, black people are more aggressive, and that's why they're in jail. But like, if you have that thought, take a moment, recognize that you've had that thought, and then do some research and think about it some more, because it's not true.
No, it's not. And for people with drug charges, like white people, as a society and a culture, white people per capita have the same amount of people who dabble with drugs as any other community. But again, the incarceration rates goes to show, Justin, now that's a specific I did get into, Megan, and it still translates 5-1 black to white, 3-1 Hispanic. And it's the same, there's, as you indicated, the population, think about the population of the white majority versus the minority, specifically 13% for black people. What is it for Hispanic? I didn't get that, but
19.
The fact that they more than double the incarceration rates being less populous is it just, there's the underlying tone in that regard. But we'll get more when my section comes up a little bit after healthcare and education. Whenever that comes up, I will have more pointed information for you good folk out there. Thank you for watching the stream. Micah or Liz, whoever's next, the floor is yours.
So I think, Micah, you were going to talk about health?
Yes. I wanted to do healthcare and specifically COVID and pregnancy, which don't really relate to each other. I just thought that would be really interesting. So I got kind of lucky, and the numbers were updated like last week on COVID cases. Yeah. So this is the numbers for Megan. So this is per 100,000 people. So for deaths, so for Black Americans who have died, it's 108 per 100,000. For Indigenous Americans, it's 90 per 100,000. For white Americans, it's 54 per 100,000. So Black Americans continue to experience the highest actual COVID-19 mortality rates nationwide, 2 or more times as high as the rate for whites and Asians. And Asians don't adjust for age, or actually they're 45 per 100,000. So nationwide, Black people are dying at 2.3 times the rate of white people. We've lost 43,250 Black lives to COVID-19. Black people account for 21% of COVID-19 deaths where race is known, because it's not always noted. And I think, I'm interested in getting into this. I think it's going to be the next thing we talk about is how this happens and why this happens. Because I think it's one thing to look at the numbers and sort of do what Megan's like, oh, sure, they live in bad communities or something. Is that really?
Is that really why?
Months ago, my coworkers and I were talking about, there was a map that I think NPR published about Dallas and where the testing sites were. And then there's a line for 30 in the South, and there's one below the line of 30. And then all the testing sites were in the white areas, North Dallas. It was oh, okay.
Okay.
So we'll get into that further. The other thing I wanted to look at was pregnancy in minority groups, and it got really lucky again here. In 2019, the CDC released their 12-year study of pregnancy in minorities. So there is this whole thing that they released and a shit ton of information. So indeed, minorities are more likely to die bearing children, whether while they're pregnant or during labor. African American, Native American, and Alaska Native women are about 3 times more likely to die from causes related to pregnancy compared to white women in the United States. And something I didn't realize is that sometimes women can die up to a year after giving birth, and it's still related back to the pregnancy and to the birth, which is terrifying. And then the American College of Obstetricians recently acknowledged that racial bias within the healthcare system is contributing to the disproportionate number of pregnancy-related deaths. So this woman, Dr. Lisa Hoyer, who was an OBGYN, is quoted as saying, "We are missing opportunities to identify risk factors prior to pregnancy, and there are often delays in recognizing symptoms during pregnancy and postpartum, particularly for Black women." So this woman was essentially yeah, we really are terrible at it, and they're more terrible at it with minorities. So I don't have hard numbers, but sort of the general stuff is Black American Indian and Alaska Native women are 2 to 3 more times likely to die. that disparity increases with age. Pregnancy-related deaths per 100,000 live births, women who are older than 30 was 4 to 5 times as high as it was for white women. So it's like it's bad and it gets worse the older you get. Awesome. And that's the sort of my general look at it.
I found out a lot about that stuff because when I was looking into being a doula. But it's so sad. It's so sad. The healthcare in America is sad, particularly for pregnant women. I
think it'll be interesting to look at healthcare for pregnant women in Texas because that is even worse.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Again, so much here, so much to dive into, guys. We're gonna keep trudging through here. I hope that those of you who are watching and still hanging with us, I hope you're learning something. I hope you're having thoughts, ideas, questions, so that when we get to, when we dive into these subjects a little more, then maybe you'll have questions. Like you brought this up in the last post, and like, what did you find out? I was really interested in blah 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 blah. So our next sort of section of privilege and how it affects is education. And so Elizabeth did some research on white privilege and education.
Yeah. So I did a whole lot of reading and it's all sort of jumbled. I will say my favorite thing that I pulled from, because I had a few articles, there is it's like a Q&A sort of article in the National Association of Independent Schools. It's actually from 2009. But I just thought it made a lot of really excellent points, like relating white privilege in education and also in general. Like there were so many things I wanted to highlight, especially when they're like doing the wrap up. So I think, like, if I understand it, they are a nonprofit that advises independent schools. So I think, I can see, like, looking at their website, the majority of those are private pre-Ks or pre-K through high school, I think. So it's not really like, this is kind of a very broad thing, because it's not like education across the country. I feel like that's going to be just another like facet of this. But I think like they just address these questions. Like they start with, what is white privilege? And I feel like things that I hear a lot in general is like, our family worked hard for what we have. Why should white people be blamed or criticized for being successful? Why do we have to talk about this? I feel like we're always bending over backwards to recruit students of color, that kind of thing. Like they're really good, and they're really good at addressing everything too, I think. But there's stuff like, and so yeah, like this I think would be more prevalent in a private school, but I think it's kind of across education. And there are public schools, like I'm looking at this and thinking like this kind of applies to the school I'm like sending my kids to, or at least intend to sending one. The other one's supposed to be going, is that it's a public school, but they like are addressing diversity. They always have. They started off as a magnet school, which like folded in like racial equity, or at least I should say at least an equal number of students from all races, like across the district. But so stuff like feeling like you have to represent your whole race, not just for you, but like for people who come after you. If you don't do well, people just assume like that it's like you could get kicked out, whereas like white legacy students don't really have to worry about if their grades are slipping. The economic factors that we talked about, or that Megan talked about, I like clearly affects kids like across the board. If you don't have like a stable place or consistent food, if your economic status is not good or is not stable, you can't focus in school. Like even small kids can tell the difference. But so what was it? There was, yeah. So the last question was, and I think these are pretty broad. Like, want too much emphasis on diversity or changing the curriculum will water down our academic standards because college wants students who can do high-level work. And I really, yeah. So the point that they made was institutions of higher education are preparing their students for the real world in which most people are poor, non-white, non-Christian, and don't speak English. To think that equity and diversity are extraneous is the ultimate white privilege and conceit. Only those in the dominant group could think themselves sufficiently educated, even as they remain largely ignorant of the cultures, histories, or literature of others. So similar, like Megan and I talked about this a little bit too, is like the school that we went to was fairly diverse. Like we read about these things, but I'm like, actually I did not experience this as much, although who knows, I'm white. But it just felt like having grown up with a bunch, like not around just a bunch of white kids, I never felt like really uncomfortable if I was the only white kid in a room. Like it a lot of times didn't occur to me. Well, you know, it just doesn't happen that much in Dallas. But I think that just, I don't know. I don't really know what my point is because that's different. That is not the same. That's not the same point as white privilege. But I'd say the overview of everything I've read, we may get into. There is a podcast that I've heard a couple of people mention. I've listened to several. I think I've listened to all the episodes of a podcast called Nice White Parents that kind of goes over like what it is, how the education system tends to favor white parents, even in just public school systems. So yeah, I look forward to doing a lot more research into that.
I think the interesting thing now with education, and if you don't have like a two-parent family, so like they're finding out now, like some kids aren't attending school because they don't have internet or they don't have their own computer.
Right.
But some kids are babysitting their younger siblings because their mom has to work. Like, what are you going to do? So I think that right now it's interesting and also super depressing.
Yeah, it's you know, COVID, I think, has brought a lot more of these things to light. Like,
Yeah.
we might have thought about them before, but now that we're dealing with this pandemic, you realize like, oh, not everybody has the internet. Not everybody has a computer in their house, you know. And
even
not every parent can work from home. Like some can and some can't.
And not every school can provide stuff for every, because like Dealey they have an iPad for every kid, and if you need a hotspot, they can get you a hotspot. But that is not the case for all the schools across the ISD.
Yeah. So I mean, not you're in Denton, like they do not. They specifically told us we do not have a Chromebook for every student at school. We don't have one. They just don't. And we were lucky enough to get one temporarily just because that's what Ty learns on. And so it was easy, like him going from the Chromebook where he could touch the screen, he was having a lot of trouble with my laptop where you can't touch the screen. You have to use the mouse. Very frustrating for him because he couldn't just do it like he did in school. And I think that's the case for, it's another factor you don't think about. Like they're using Chromebooks at school and then they get home and all they have is a desktop, you know, from the 90s. You know, I'm just saying, like there's a difference in, it's another thing that like you don't take into account. Like, yeah, we have a computer at home, but it's not what they're used to using because they're used to using this Chromebook where they can touch the screen and manipulate it differently, or it's faster, or the internet at school is faster, and they're being bogged down by all of these things in their home environment that are hurdles to them just doing their schoolwork.
Yeah.
You know, not only that, those are great points, because my girls both of them have an iPad through GISD. When we were doing virtual school, now they have them, one of them uses it, and the other one doesn't even, the teacher doesn't use the iPad at all. But it just stays in her backpack. It's like amazing. But the one thing I wanted to touch on, the questions that you were asking still shows that old school underlying mentality of, you're just not smart enough. No matter what we do for you, you're gonna hold the class back. We're bending over backwards to make sure to bring you along, because aren't
You're just not as smart.
yeah, you're not
Well, yeah, and because whiteness is normalness. Like that's the bar.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Y'all are the prettiest and the smartest and all those good things. Although, it is what it is. I'm being facetious in that because we're all pretty and beautiful. But that being said, it's just those underlying tones that you're gonna hold the education process back because you're a minority, and that's the only reason. And as Michael pointed out, there's modern studies that show brain function and capability amongst all small children, no matter their race or whatever, if afforded the same scenarios and environments, all of them show the same aptitude, the same ability, the same creativeness. And it's a shame that it's like flat earthers or people who deny climate change. The facts are out there. All you got to do is a little research, and you can prove to yourself that these things are true. Yeah. The science is factual. The experiments have been done and proven. But nope, we're gonna go. Nah, that's not it. I saw a YouTube video today, and it was by a guy who did an experiment by pouring water over an orange. And that just shows me, yes, that's flat Earth. I don't get it. I don't get it. And that's why we're doing this. And you know what? Thank y'all for watching. And some of y'all still deny the things that we're bringing to you. And as a good Texan, I will say, bless your heart.
Bless
I think so. The next part that we want to do, I think it's going to help with that, and things that we've personally experienced. I think that really helps some people be like, oh shit. But we didn't organize this part, so I don't know who wants to go first.
So because Joe brought it up before we started, and I think probably Mike and Elizabeth have heard this story, but a personal story, and Joe brought it up because he was talking about Band-Aids, when you're talking about being represented and white privilege. So when I was in college, it was Black History Month, and our teacher, my professor, my college professor. So I was the only minority in my class. I went to a school in Missouri, and I was the only minority in my class. It was Black History Month, and he gave us a quiz, and it was sort of to test your aptitude, about white privilege, sort of do you notice these things in your everyday life? Okay, he gave this test to our entire class. I was the only Black person in this class. This was a smaller college class. I think there was 15 or 20 of us in there. Okay, but the questions on this test were things like, do you notice that flesh-colored Band-Aids are white? Do you notice that flesh-colored tights are white? Do you notice that they were all questions about, do you notice your whiteness in the world? And as the only Black student in this classroom, I raised my hand and I was like, are you serious? Do I seriously have to take this test? And he looked at me and he was like, yes. And I was like, are you sure that's the right answer? And he was like, Megan, just take it. And I was like, this is bullshit. I'm not going to take this test. The answer to all of these questions is yes, I've noticed because I'm Black. I don't feel like I have to explain that to you.
Yeah, he should have been like, oh no, just go home and come back next time.
Can I just get 100 for Black History Month and we just move on? Not that there are things that I don't know about Black history, because there are, but like on that scale, it was ridiculous because he legitimately didn't understand why the test was silly for a person who's Black answering these questions. I'm like, of course I've noticed these things. I'm a Black person and I live in America. Yes, I know. I noticed that there aren't Black people on television. I noticed that when I go to buy tights, there isn't a color that fits me. I noticed that it's hard to find my shade of makeup when I go to buy makeup. You know, these are all things that I notice because I am Black. The answer to all of these questions is yes. But it was very sort of, and I think for me, it was the reason it was so sort of like off-putting and ironic is because he was trying to make a point. And like, I get it. I get that he was trying to make a point, but the point that he was trying to make did not apply to me.
Yeah, it seems like he's very naive in that, you know, hey, this is for the 14 other of you
Right.
who know these things, you know?
Yes, exactly. But so that is one of my stories that I think I've told people before, but it was just a very strange, are you serious right now? Are you sure this is what we want to do?
Well, I think
that was part of it too. It's and for that month, the month of February, in that class, I represented all Black people in America. If there was a question about something, Megan, can we say this? Megan, is this okay? I'm like, I mean, I can tell you how I feel about it, but I'm not every Black person in America. I cannot sit here and represent my race, yet I am expected to sit here and represent my race. And that is hard too, because you don't want to give the wrong answer, right? I don't want to say something is okay, and then you go out into the world as a white person and you're like, well, Megan in my college class said that this was fine. And they're like, no, bitch, it's not okay.
You have to phrase it as, my Black friend said this was okay. Right. My Black friend.
Okay.
No, my one Black friend.
My one Black friend, yeah. I think that if you're white and you're straight, you don't realize this, because if you're a minority in any kind of way, that you have been in that situation where someone turns to you and says, what do you think about? And you have to respond for your entire race or all the lesbians or whatever. And that is so fucking bananas. And white straight people just don't get it, I don't think.
I was going to say, yeah, when have you been asked the question to represent your entire ethnicity?
Yeah.
You know?
I think maybe Mike and Elizabeth have probably been asked more during this show. What do you think about white privilege? Than they probably have ever in their entire life. But
it is, yeah. It's bananas to think about, because how dare you place a responsibility on me to answer for everyone? What if I say the wrong thing? It's just my personal opinion. I don't know.
No, I hear you. I agree.
Yeah. And I don't know. I'm gonna say I don't mind if I accidentally misspeak for white straight people, but because I'm not a minority at all. But yeah, I guess I still wouldn't want to do that. But yeah, it's I guess my point is yeah, I mean, it's white framing again. It's well, that's just white people are all different, right?
You're allowed to be different, too, right? There's a range of whiteness that is acceptable, and I think and I think this is privilege and maybe media, I'm not sure, but like with Black people, you're either the Huxtables, right? You're the Huxtables, and you middle class family, and you're doing well, or you live in the projects. There's no in between space. Like there's no room for you to be anything else. You're either the best of the best of Black people, or you're trash.
Yeah.
Well, you got to forget that in between, because you could be like the successful athlete or rapper, who never really gets the hood taken out of him. You can take the boy out the hood, but you can't take the hood out the homeboy. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I actually would like to speak on one of my experiences, and this is from my own family, because I am Black and white descent, and growing up on the Black side of my family, I witnessed firsthand from my Black family how different I was by the way they treated me. So, my half whiteness got me alienated in a sense from some of them. I was treated differently. And yeah, that was, in hindsight, kind of traumatizing. I didn't realize it at the time. I was just like, you're my family. My mom's my mom, which is your sister. So it's like some of y'all are just as light as I am. But because I don't have a Black father, I don't get it. You know what I'm saying? It's like you start to feel like you're not loved by your family. You know what I'm saying? And it was not cool. It was not cool. And it took me some time as an adult to get over that, because I didn't realize how much pent up. You don't know what to think in those situations, and then you grow up and you start witnessing things and come to realization. It's like, oh, you son of a, that was not cool at all. Oh, you know what I'm saying? Why would you tell an 8-year-old, oh, you think you're better than us because you're half white?
Oh, no.
Like, dude, I'm 8. I just want to go outside and play, bro.
Just go in there.
Like, can I get a sandwich, please? Why I gotta? Oh my gosh! And then outside on the other side, and I don't know. This is not necessarily white privilege. This is like my white daddy's privilege, if you will. But like, I go to live with him, and obviously we talked about the hair. I'm not, my hair does not lay flat. It does not grow in luxurious curls or in waves or anything. I can't use hairspray because it'll just create a hairspray fuzz, if you will, over my hair. It doesn't get absorbed in or anything like that. But my dad, I go to live with him when I'm 17. He's in Odessa, and he has his white good old boyfriend pick me up in the Suburban. And so I'm just kind of sitting and observing. We get closer to his house, and my dad literally tells me this: hey, when you're down here with me, whoever you meet, you're white. What? Oh. Yeah. Don't talk about your, expletive mama. You know what I'm saying? He used a choice word. Love that he referred to my mom like that. And I was like, say, we're not going to do this right now, but I'm half Black. Have you looked at the hair? So we'll get it cut low. Nobody will be able to tell the difference. Yeah, that doesn't work, man. If anything, you're better off telling me I should be Hispanic. I can't be white. I'm not white, and I can't pass for white. Okay, let's just put that out there. And this coming from my father, so from both sides of my family, the weird dichotomy and the white privilege and anti-white privilege, I guess. It's a weird thing. And then other standard stories. Yes, I've been pulled over and been called everything under the sun. I've gotten away with some things that I shouldn't have gotten away with. Been frisked, searched, and had guns pulled on me for things that no regular person should have to go through. For, like, I got asked to get out of my car with guns withdrawn for speeding. Now, true, I was going like 15 over, but I wasn't erratic or anything like that. So there's that as well.
I say same for me. Like I've had my car searched for my taillight being out.
What?
Right. Yeah, I know that happens.
They asked to search my car. They pulled me over because my taillight was out, and then searched my car.
Oh my god.
No, I have sat on a curb or in the what's the service lane on the highway, like I-35 north,
like the
you
front
can
end?
pull over to the right, whatever. I have sat on that service lane while my car was being searched. Again, I don't even know why they pulled me over. I think they said they thought they saw us, smoking weed or what have you. Literally, my buddy had a cup holder with a regular ashtray in it, and he put a cigarette out. And we're no socks, no shoes or whatever, handcuffed on the side of the road. Yeah. So, yes.
Yes. So, I know,
Um,
Micah, you said you had some things that you wanted to talk about. I felt like.
Yes. I guess the story that sticks out in my mind, when I was just out of college, I was working at a sandwich shop, and in Cleveland, and it was owned by a white dude. His white daughter worked there, and then otherwise the staff was sort of split white and black. There may have been some Hispanic kids. And there was a lot of like pretty strict rules about showing up for work. Like if you couldn't show up for your shift, you had to find someone to cover you, sort of basic stuff. But if you didn't find someone and you were a no-show, you were like, that was immediate dismissal. And it was my second job. And like my first job had me do something and it conflicted with making sandwiches. And I didn't do anything about it. Like I didn't call in to say I wasn't coming. I didn't find my own replacement because it was just like this minimum wage job, right? I just didn't go to work and nothing happened. And right around that time, I think maybe right after, maybe like a couple weeks after, this black girl did the same thing and was immediately let go. And it was like a really big like wake up call to me. Like she wasn't any better or worse at the job than I was. Like I didn't really give a shit, quite frankly. You're paying me $7 an hour to make a sandwich. Like maybe I'll show up, maybe I won't. But that was really big. Like holy shit! Like I should have been fired. Like if that's the rule, that's the rule, and like apply it evenly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Can I just point out something just in that story right there? Just to me, semi taken back. Just the fact that you'd be like, $7 sandwich job. Maybe I show up, maybe I don't. Who cares? That right there.
Right there.
Like, whoa.
That's also your privilege.
Yeah.
For sure, because I was sure that if I got fired from that place, I could go find another $7 job.
Oh no, right, and I don't deny that at all. I just, for me or whatever, I'm just like, well, if I get fired, then you know what I'm saying, it's gonna look bad. I have to explain what happened. You know what I mean? The manager is gonna talk crap or whatever, and just like it's a whole different set of circumstances. Whereas you're just like, maybe I do, maybe I don't, and I'll just find another one, no problem.
Yeah, like
wow.
To put it in perspective a little bit, like I was working one job that was applied to my degree, and that was, I'd never put down a reference. Like I never told anyone I worked there. I just did $7 an hour.
No, right on.
So I'm like really lucky to have been able to do so.
No, I'm glad you told the story because that meant something to you or whatever. I wasn't trying to make light of that. That's awesome. Yeah. That I'm sorry. I think I detracted from your story and sentiment, and I apologize.
No, I think there's like multiple. I think that's good because there's multiple ways to look at it.
So I feel like we're running really long, but I also don't know how long we had cut out. Elizabeth, did you have like a story, or do we want to call it a night? Because it's like we've been on the call for an hour and 40 minutes now. But again, I don't know how long we were not streaming. Okay, so yeah. So Elizabeth, if you got one, and then maybe we can always talk more about it next time.
Yeah, I have just a brief one of just like the moment that I got clued in, because I think I'd like heard about heard the phrase white privilege tossed around. I hadn't really like thought about it in any capacity really. But yeah. And then I remember like reading something about, because I had seen someone in the store like had their baby in a Moby wrap, and I was like, oh, that thing is so cool. Like if I ever have a baby, I'm totally using one of those. And then I heard a story or read something about a woman who was saying like white privilege is being able to use a baby wrap and not have people ask if it's from like your native culture. Like they just,
Is that what they do?
like
where you're
someone
from?
sees someone who's not white wearing a baby before, and I think it's become a little more like across the board, everybody baby wears now, but yeah, never occurred to me. But that's the other thing. It's like it never occurred to me that somebody would go up to somebody who wasn't white and just assume that they were not American born, or like I don't even know if it's that, but it's like, yeah, it's making presumptions about somebody because they're doing something different and they're not white. And I was like, oh, that's a thing that would never happen to me. I get it.
I get it.
So yeah, that's, I mean,
I think that's a pretty good one, because I think there's people don't. If you haven't been there, then it's hard to acknowledge or think about.
Right.
That's what we're here to try and get you guys to do: acknowledge and think about it. Ask us questions or ask me questions. I'm pretty open about my feelings about things, and I have no problem telling you you're wrong.
Okay.
I'm kidding. Okay, so we're gonna wrap it up. I hope that if you watched all of it. I hope that if you started, that maybe you'll finish later. It's a big subject, and we're doing the best we can. So if you have questions, comments, websites that you have like looked at yourself and found information on that you found super helpful, like shoot them to me, and or post them in the Facebook page so that everybody else can read them. The more we help each other learn about this stuff, the better off we all are. Yeah. All right. So what's the wrap up, Michael?
The next one is November 10th. And we'll talk more about healthcare.
We're going to talk about disparities in healthcare. So that's on tap for next week. So next week we'll talk about healthcare. We'll see you guys then. Don't be a racist and wash your hands.
The earth is round.